Anyway, all right, let's review video games instead of talking about insurance. Let me put my marker here so I know where to cut, so I don't. All right, let's talk about Turtles in Time. So we played Turtles in Time just now. It took me, I don't know, less than an hour, I think. But right around. But I was playing the arcade edition, which is, in my opinion, very different from the Super Nintendo edition. My personal preference is for the Super Nintendo edition, but the arcade edition is a perfectly acceptable game, right? So, you know, let's talk about it. In terms of graphics, again, considering this game was from 1991, I think this game looked pretty darn good. I'm gonna give it a 9. Oops, I'm typing in Twitch chat. I'm gonna give it a 9, and the reason I'm giving it a 9 and not a 10 like I did the arcade game is I know not a lot of time passed between the two games, but like there really wasn't a whole lot of improvement in the graphics. There was a couple things. They added the ability to like throw the foot soldiers towards the screen, and they had that, like, I forget what they call it, but it would be, they could basically like scale a sprite like really big, and that's kind of how they achieved that effect, was to just to scale the sprite. Anyway, but they didn't really go crazy, and there was a lot of flashing lights that I didn't enjoy. It's not good. You got to stop doing that, guys. Like, I know games now have all sorts of like warnings and stuff about epilepsy, but just don't do it. Like, don't flash black and white or black and bright green. Just don't. All right. Sound. I think this game has a rockin' soundtrack. It is one of the best. I think it is better soundtrack than the arcade game. However, I think the sound effects in this version are weirdly worse than the Super Nintendo version, and even the soundtrack doesn't sound quite right. Like, it's weird that the arcade sound is somehow worse than the home console sound. So I'm gonna give it an 8, just because I think the quality is not really there. But the soundtrack itself is really good. The sound effect is good. The voice lines were a nice add. I really liked what they had with the voice lines, but there was just something off about it. Just some of the sounds just didn't sound right, and like the music just kind of didn't have the right vibe to it. I don't know. All right, gameplay. This one is another straightforward left to right beat 'em up. They did add a couple levels with like the surfing in there, although I think the arcade game had some surfing. I will say this, they did add some elements, like having like dash attacks and the flip attack and that kind of stuff. It's kind of a bummer because with the arcade controls, you still only had 2 buttons and a stick, so there was no dedicated run button. And this game did not add one. So like Hyperzone Heist added a run button after the fact, which I thought was really cool. This game did no such thing. So the running was a little bit, I don't know. We'll talk about that in the control section, but the gameplay I think was fine. It's very plain Jane. It's very arcade in that this one was meant to munch the quarters. So sometimes like the hits feel really unfair and like the bosses were kind of tough. But overall, I think it's still really good. I'll give it a 6 because it's not very interesting. It's just mindless fun. The controls are fine. They're responsive for the most part. Every once in a while I was having some trouble getting it to accept the double tap. Not double tap, but pressing jump and attack at the same time. So it wasn't perfect, but I give the controls about, I'm going to give it a 7.5, and it's because of the lack of a dedicated run button. The way running worked in this game is that you just had to hold a single direction for like a second or two, and then they would start running. And so sometimes he would run when I didn't want him to, and sometimes he wouldn't run when I did want him to. So I would have enjoyed either a dedicated run button or like something that was more of a trigger. Like the Super Nintendo version uses double tapping of the D-pad to get it done. So would have been nice. Story, I mean, I feel like this is like a broken record. There's not a lot going on with the story in TMNT games. It's usually like Shredder showed up, he did something bad. He either kidnapped someone or stole something, and we got to go get it back. So this one, Shredder steals the Statue of Liberty. I don't know how. And then where it gets weird though is that this one is not very cohesive. In the SNES version, it is a little bit more cohesive. Like you track him down to the Technodrome to try to like and confront him, and then he like traps you in the time portal. In this one, you're just surfing through the sewers, fighting pizza monsters, and all of a sudden Shredder astral projects himself into the sewers and is like, "I'm sick of you," and then he sends you to Dinosaur Land. Like it made no sense. So I think that this one, like the story actually gets a little bit of a bump down, but it's fine. There doesn't really need to be a whole lot there to convince me to walk left to right, pressing the button a bunch of times and watching stuff die. It's still fun. In terms of innovation, this game doesn't do a lot different from the arcade game. You know, the time travel gimmick is nice, you know, going to different areas and periods of time. But I don't feel like this one did as much as it could have with like having the enemies be like specific to the time period. There were a few, like there's the guys that ride the dinosaurs, but like the present and the future has robots, and then the past has bow and arrows, but so does the future. Like, I don't know. It just didn't, I felt like they could have done more to be like, yes, these are like period, specific, enemies. They just didn't do that like the Turtles in Time did on the Super Nintendo. So I think in terms of innovation, this was a very safe game. Like they didn't really try anything new here. It was just like, here's another Turtles game. Content and replayability. This one kind of falls into the same category as Arcade and Hyperstone Heist. They're not very long. They're about an hour, give or take, but they are highly replayable. These games are still fun to this day to just sit down and play them through. Very enjoyable. So high marks for replayability in my book. So let's total this up. 9, 8, 6, 7, 5, 5, 8. 6.9, baby. That feels about right to me. I would put this one like on par with Hyperstone Heist. I think it's better in some regards and worse in some regards, but I think overall they're both really good. But I think the original arcade beats them for a number of reasons, one of which is nostalgia. But anyhow, that is my verdict on Turtles in Time. So I think I'm just gonna put an hour. I think it took me about an hour, giving a 6.90. All right.